When I got into the courtyard, I found Estella waiting with the keys, but she neither asked me where I had been, nor why I had kept her waiting, and there was a bright flush upon her face, as though something had happened to delight her. Instead of going straight to the gate, too, she stepped back into the passage and beckoned. "Come here. You may kiss me, if you like." I kissed her cheek as she turned it to me. I think I would have gone through a great deal to kiss her cheek, but I felt that the kiss was given to the coarse common boy as a piece of money might have been, and that it was worth nothing. So I'm doing something different for today. This is the 150th review for this website. 150th day, 150th book, 150th review. So I've chosen Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I must confess that I have never read anything by Charles Dickens before. There's a reason for this. It's a very silly reason, which is that years ago my father argued that if you read any Charles Dickens, you would have sufficient experience of the entire English literary canon that you would never have to read another novel. This struck me as an extremely strange thing to say, and because I was his son, I immediately decided not to read Charles Dickens and rebel and read everything else I could get my hands on. So I've never read Charles Dickens, unfortunately. I decided for today's review that I would choose this book as it is about a young man seeking his fortune and seeking to make something of himself, and what we do in our lives, what we choose to do to become the people we wish to become, whether it's a matter of fate, whether it's a matter of destiny, whether it's a matter of free will. It's all bound up in this book and this notion of great expectations, what one can achieve in life with either the proper support of benefactors or on your own merits. I have to say this is a fantastic book, and I'm much ashamed that I never actually took the time to read it before. You've probably seen a film, you've probably seen the South Park episode, so most of you will know the story even if you haven't read the book. Young Pip grows up orphaned by his parents. He's raised by his sister, who marries a local blacksmith known as Joe. She thereafter becomes known to Pip as Mrs. Joe, and she raises him as a child, as her child, quite sternly, with much abuse, much as the way she treats her husband, poor Joe. The two young boy Pip and Joe become companions of a sort, friends, fellow sufferers of this very harsh lady. One evening, Pip is accosted by a convict in a graveyard a mile away from his home, who asks him to steal a file to help him remove his manacles. Pip does so. The convict frees himself, only to be rearrested along with another convict. This is described in the most arresting manner. It's fantastically written. The thoughts of a young child being captured by this shaven-headed man, threatens his life, mentions that his heart and liver will be eaten if he betrays him. It's the most grotesque and horrible type of imagery, and it's perfectly appropriate to the idea of a child being scared witless by this strange encounter. Dickens then has Pip go on to the next stage of his life, which is entering the service of Miss Havisham, Miss Havisham is one of the great literary monsters. She is a woman who was spurned on the day of her wedding, which just happened was also her birthday, to add insult to injury. The man in question was actually working to defraud her. of her wealth, in common with uh, an accomplice whose identity is eventually revealed. So she has dedicated her life to becoming a symbol of that abandonment, and she takes pleasure in the pain and suffering of others. So Pip, as this spirit of innocence entering her home, is ripe for abuse. So he meets young Estella, who I just gave that quotation from at the beginning, is a young girl also living with Miss Havisham, who is being more or less conditioned to become Miss Havisham Mark II. Equally cold, equally embittered, equally distrustful of men, contemptuous of them. Pip becomes a plaything for them to manipulate and use for their amusement. It's seemingly the case that he is oscillating from one dominant woman in his life to another, from Mrs. Joe to Miss Havisham. He is battered and broken and left at the end of it feeling completely powerless. So, for someone like that, for someone who's entered life into a low station, Dickens seems to be saying, great expectations can only be achieved by the intercession of another, and it just so happens a mysterious secret benefactor does give funds and property to Pip to manage and support himself in his new station in life, a man of means, a gentleman about town in London. There's a wonderful bit where Pip asks his guardian, Mr. Jaggers, who is an attorney for Mrs. Havisham, so Pip logically assumes that Miss Havisham is actually his benefactor, which he does not dispute him of. Mr. Jaggers explains to him that London is not necessarily the only place in the world where one might be robbed, murdered, abandoned. It's as good as any other place. It's likely to happen there. So Pip has become catapulted from this small village life with a blacksmith and his sister to the great city of London, where he becomes a man of means, a businessman, a man who can actually marshal his affairs, and he believes that this has been something intended for him since he entered into Miss Havisham's household, and that, of course, it is inevitable that Estella will become his bride. From the very beginning of this book, we have this notion of what is meant for us to be when we grow up. What is intended for us? Pip's understanding of religion is touched upon. His viewing of his parents' gravestones is quite literal. It's quite poignant where they talk about the gravestone lettering states that his mother is above, and he assumes, well, therefore she is up in heaven and everyone else is down in hell. And that's what that literally means, as opposed to the soul departing to heaven. The names that Dickens introduces are fantastic. You have Mr. Jaggers, you have Wopsle at one point, Mr. Wemmick, I'm just reading here. There was a few others I noted. Can't seem to find them now. Oh wait, here we go. See, this is the difference between a live recording and writing it down. Joe Gargery, the blacksmith. Gargery. What else do we have here? It's all very odd, very strange, and his use of language is quite clever in that, because this was serialized fiction, this was being published in magazines. There's this intensity about it throughout. It's actually 3 volumes long, but it would originally have been serialized segments, so you would have had troughs and peaks in every single chapter representing that. It's supposed to keep you reading. Wait for the next serialized issue. So reading this book is just continuous ramping up of excitement as you go. It's also very funny. There's lovely little plays on words. There's a fantastic sequence where a Wopsle, I'm pretty sure it's Wopsle, who's this terrible actor, is performing Hamlet, and Pip and his friend are in the audience watching and laughing despite themselves. They want to support this acquaintance of theirs, but it's just terrible stuff. So they're laughing away, and everyone's laughing at it. And then, of course, the actor approaches him afterwards. How was it? Oh, it was wonderful. You owned the part. Well done. A little joke at the expense of Shakespeare lovies there, but it's extraordinary book. Really enjoyed reading it. I can kind of see what my dad was saying. I'm embarrassed that I haven't read anything by Dickens before. What can I say? The man you were just talking about. So I would heartily recommend this book to anyone. It's great, great yarn. I use that phrase a lot, I know, but it really is. And there's lovely little digs at various high society figures and notions of what makes the good life, the wealthy life, in comparison to, say, someone who just lives within their means. You have Miss Havisham, who to the young Pip represents the pinnacle of social advancement, and then she's sitting in her house facing a rotting wedding cake that's been sitting there for years, gnawed at by rats, nested in by spiders. This is one of the great literary images right there of disgust, horror. And she's literally been ossified by her class. The humiliation of being abandoned, the humiliation of being left at the altar. It's because she can't simply move on. She has to make a spectacle of herself. She has no way of entering the real world, because it's all about how people see you. So poor Pip doesn't understand that what's important in life is what you do, not how you're seen to be, and that's the tragedy of the heart of the book. That it takes him so long to realize that Joe the blacksmith, kindly poor Joe, who's so terrified to meet Miss Havisham and stuttering and constantly making circumlocution, addressing Pip rather than addressing Miss Havisham, he actually has a better handle on life than this terrifying old woman rotting away in her banquet. So it's quite an interesting, very well written book, and yeah, I am going to announce a competition shortly to celebrate this 150th review. If you would like this book, please tell me why. Maybe a little mini review of your own. You can do so in the comments thread under here. I have a number of other books, and what I'm going to do is, beneath this video, there will be a list of the other books. I'll probably review them for the site that I own, and if you would prefer to have one of them, let me know, and I will choose the best mini review, and they will receive that book. I'll post it to you. So thanks for watching. I suppose reading. I hope it didn't go on too long, and cheers. All the best.